welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. As always, I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 47. This is the Preseason Game 2 preview episode. There was so much news that happened in this week, I decided I couldn't wait until after this preseason game was over. I had to come back, hit you with some news items that happened throughout the week. So even though this episode is going to go up like right before the preseason game starting, I had to come and hit you with some of these news items. So in this episode, we're going to talk about all the things that happened throughout the week when the Bengals traveled to Chicago to have their joint practices against the Chicago Bears that they're about to face in preseason game 1. There's some interesting contract news. One of our favorite Bengals signed a contract extension, probably not the one you might be thinking of, but still a pretty good one. We'll take that, and also some unfortunate injury news and roster news that we'll cover, and then we'll also talk about what we're looking forward to in the upcoming preseason game. On our last episode, we talked about how the first-round pick, Amarius Mims, was going to be out for several weeks with a strained pectoral muscle. I listened to Amarius give an interview on the Bengals Booth podcast with Dan Horde, and he kind of made it sound like maybe it was something that he had been dealing with for a few days, or who knows how long he had been dealing with it. It could have been something he was working on or had happened to him like before camp even started. We don't really know exactly when this issue happened, but he was kind of saying that something happened. Yeah, he maybe should have brought it up sooner or brought it to the attention of the training staff earlier. So it doesn't sound like maybe he even heard it in the game, but maybe he was just kind of dealing with something, thought he could just work through it, and then finally they went and got an MRI or whatever it was and found out, oh, actually maybe he had like a small tear in his in his pec, something like that. But he's going to be out, and we don't know, since we don't know when he was injured, we don't really know exactly how long he's going to take to come back. So I get kind of why Zach Taylor said several, because he doesn't really know either. We'll see. But right after the injury, they said, but luckily, by coincidence, we have Trent Brown, the 10-year Pro Bowl veteran, coming back. He'll be fine, and he's going to be working into practice because he was physically unable to perform, or he was inactive, whatever. So he came back, all good. Then they had practice on Tuesday, and there was some news that came out of that. First of all, one thing I didn't even notice that I wanted to bring up right away was they kind of slipped it out under the radar. Jeff Gunter, he was a 7th-round pick out of Coastal Carolina a couple years ago, and he's been on the practice squad for the last 2 seasons. He never made it to the active roster, but he did get he did get called up on a few games, so he's had some game action, but not really he was never a starter. Most of the time he wasn't dressed for the games, but all of a sudden they said Jeff Gunter retired, and he's moving on. He said apparently, or he didn't say this, but according to some reports from Dave Lapham, who again works for the Bengals. You got to always keep in mind Dave Lapham works for the Bengals, so he's telling you the team narrative. But he said that Jeff Gunter maybe had been dealing with some knee injuries recently, so wasn't really 100% physically, and also was planning to go back to school. We don't know. You never know what could be going on in his life, mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, all those different things. You never, you can't understand what somebody's going through until you walk a mile in their shoes. So even though, from a financial perspective, he hasn't really gotten a big contract, he hasn't made a lot of money because he's never been on the active team roster. I think in the last 2 years, he's made maybe a total of maybe $1 million, which is, obviously a lot of money, but I don't know what other job he's going to be able to get that's going to pay him like that. But it's not something that he's going to be able to never have a job and never have to work again in his life. So whatever he's going to do, I'm wishing him all the best of luck and great success in his life's work, as Paul Brown used to say. If it's not going to be football and he's not committed, it's good to just get out now and don't put yourself through more negative emotions if that's what he was feeling. So good luck, Jeff Gunter. It's too bad because he was in the same draft class with Cam Sample, who's going to be out for the rest of the year with a torn Achilles. And who knows, maybe he was friends with Cam Sample and that hurt him psychologically, seeing his friend go out. We don't know, but basically they lost 2 defensive ends in the short period of a couple weeks. Cam Sample and Jeff Gonter no longer going to be playing for the Bengals this year. Then Zach Taylor didn't even mention that. Maybe he didn't know at the time, but at the practice, he came over and dropped some other bombshells on the reporters. He was like, oh yeah, by the way, Jake Browning is dealing with a rib issue. As you know, Jake Browning is the backup quarterback, Joe Burrow's primary backup, who would be expected to play in the preseason since Joe Burrow's not going to play. Zach Taylor said, oh, he's actually going to miss some time. Didn't give any kind of an estimate on when Jake Browning would be coming back. Doesn't sound extremely serious, but he was very vague, just said it's a rib issue. So it could be a strained rib. Hopefully he didn't get hit and he's got like bruised ribs or something like that. So we'll have to see about Jake Browning. We're going to see a lot more Logan Woodside and Rocky Lombardi, the other backup quarterbacks, in the preseason game if Jake Browning can't play. Also on Tuesday, that was the first day where Jamar Chase was not in attendance at practice. He normally has been out on the practice field just wearing hat, t-shirt, and shorts, watching everything and giving people, pointers, what they can do. This was the first time on Tuesday where he was not in attendance at practice at all. Zach Taylor said he was day-to-day. No further comments. Zach Taylor explicitly said, he was just like, Jamar Chase is day-to-day. I'm going to leave it at that. So what does that even mean? But then when you start digging into Jamar Chase's contract situation, it all makes a lot more sense. Because Jamar Chase, his compensation for this year is going to be a $1 million base salary. So for every game, if you divide $1 million by 17 games, it's a little bit more than $60,000 per game would be a game check for Jamar Chase. So not even like $100,000 per game that Jamar Chase would make if he played the entire season. But then you also have to consider Jamar Chase was due a roster bonus of $3.8 million. So if he just reported to Bengals training camp, he was with the team on the 3rd day of training camp. All he had to do was show up, be there, didn't have to practice, didn't have to do anything, but just, hey, yo, what's up? I'm here, $3.8 million, thank you very much. That makes sense for a perspective of why is Jamar Chase holding out? Well, he already earned like over 75% of the money he could even possibly make this year already. So there's nothing else for him to do. There's nothing else for him to prove. He's already made more money than he could make. Even if he played every single game, he'd only make $1 million more. And if I'm Jamar Chase, as we'll talk about later, there were some serious injuries that happened. If I'm Jamar Chase, you can't be putting your body at risk, potentially getting injured for $1 million. No, thank you. So I totally understand where Jamar Chase is coming. Don't practice. Don't do anything. Don't even look at the weight room wrong until you get that contract. I don't blame Jamar Chase at all. And another great example of this, Brad Robbins, the punter, somehow he got injured before practice even started. So Brad, they showed pictures of him like hunched over on the practice field. He injured his right hip during warm-ups, which is, I don't know if I've ever heard of somebody getting hurt during warm-ups. Usually that's how you prevent getting injured. So I don't know. Professional athletes don't normally hurt themselves in the warm-up. So I don't, Brad, who knows? But he's already like prematurely bald. He's got that weird mustache. Who knows what kind of weird warm-up motions he had going on. But he was down for the count. Brad Robbins is out. No estimated return on Brad Robbins. So all of a sudden, the punter battle has turned into Ryan Rico, and he's the only punter they have healthy on the roster. They got rid of Austin McNamara. Brad Robbins is injured. Ryan Rico, we're going to see an extended look at him. They have not brought back Austin McNamara, so that's probably a good sign that Brad Robbins' injury isn't too serious either. But just like Jake Browning, we don't know when he's going to come back. It's not a short-term injury, probably. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, the good news was Charlie Jones was back out there. So we were scared about Charlie Jones. He went down, got carted off, Paycor. They said it was a non-contact injury at first. Then it was like, oh, actually, maybe he just banged into somebody else's knee with their knee. So it was great to see Charlie Jones healthy, practicing again. He should be all good to go for this upcoming preseason. Backtracking for just a second, we were talking about defensive ends who are not going to be playing for the Bengals. One former Bengal defensive end who will not be playing for the Bengals again, Carl Lawson. He was with the Jets for the last few seasons. The Bengals made the wise move. Instead of re-signing Carl Lawson as a free agent, they signed Trey Hendrickson. And Trey Hendrickson has been to the Pro Bowl. And everybody was like, oh, it's the same price. Trey Hendrickson, Carl Lawson, what's the difference? Why don't they just keep Carl Lawson? He knows the system already. Well, the first year Carl Lawson went to the Jets, he tore his Achilles tendon, which isn't his fault. But it just couldn't have gone any worse for Carl. Couldn't have gone any better for the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson. And that's why Trey Hendrickson wants a new contract now, but he's not going to get that. But anyway, Carl Lawson signed with the Cowboys. Cowboys also lost one of their defensive ends. I think it was Sam Adams, Sam Edwards, I don't know. Some guy, he tore his Achilles tendon. So the you got to watch out. If you're a pass rusher, you got to watch your Achilles. Those things are delicate. Carl Lawson is going to be on the Cowboys this year. You know who else isn't coming back for the Bengals? Geno Atkins is not coming back, because I know Bengals fans love to get all like nostalgic for old Bengals. Oh, maybe he'll come back out of retirement for the Super Bowl. Oh, Andrew Whitworth is not going to come back. Carlos Dunlap isn't come back. None of those guys are coming back. So unfortunately, the Bengals are going to have to find some new answers, some new solutions on the team. But they got plenty of draft picks. They had 10 draft picks, a bunch of undrafted free agents. The Bengals are young. They're one of the youngest teams in the NFL. I think they're top 5 youngest teams in the NFL. But then around the NFL, just some real quick headlines. We saw the Patriots. We were talking about how Matt Judon, their defensive edge rusher, wanted a new contract. He's making about, I want to say like $6.5 million this year. The market is obviously a lot higher than that. So the Patriots traded Matt Judon to the Falcons for a 3rd-round pick. Falcons are making a lot of moves, so we'll see if the Falcons are competitive for a playoff spot. I mean, NFC North isn't good. They got the Saints, Panthers, Falcons. I'm trying to think of who else. Buccaneers. Oh, yeah, that's who it was. Tampa Bay. I mean, whatever. Tampa Bay. None of those teams are good. So the Falcons, they got as good a chance as anybody. Another thing we saw, Denzel Ward, since he's in the AFC North, we'll hit a little Browns news here. Denzel Ward, top cornerback. A lot of people know him because he played at Ohio State in college. He got another concussion in practice. And even though they're wearing the Guardian caps in practice, he fell and hit the back of his head. So you see a lot of concussions happen like that, where guys fall backward, all the momentum is going, and it carries. That's actual momentum, Zach Taylor. When your head is falling backwards, physically you can't stop it, and your brain has momentum and hits inside your skull when you hit the ground, and the momentum gives you a concussion. So Denzel Ward, we're going to have to see, because he's had a number of concussions. You hate to see that, and you don't want him to come back too quick, because then you're susceptible to get another concussion if you try to come back and start hitting your head into stuff again. So hopefully a speedy recovery for Denzel Ward. But let's move on to Thursday practice with the Bears. So since it was in Chicago, a lot of the beat reporters for the Bengals made the trip to Chicago, and they were complaining because the Bears media team didn't let anybody record practice. It's kind of surprising that the Bengals let all these reporters post clips up on social media, on X, on Instagram, of the Bengals practicing, because you can sometimes hear like the calls that Joe Burrow's making at the line of scrimmage, telling what the play is. That could be information that another team, if they wanted to, they could watch these clips and get some kind of scouting information, advanced knowledge about the Bengals, use it as a competitive advantage. So these reporters were getting all bent out of shape, like, oh my God, I can't believe the Bears didn't let us record everything at practice. Well, that's smart from the Bears. Like, they don't want people recording stuff and making money off of their practices. I don't fault the Bears at all, but all we got was verbal accounts of what happened from practice. So we didn't get any videos of what happened, but according to the reports that we heard, since it was raining, they were trying to make a decision so they go inside or outside. Since they have so many people, that's 90 players on both teams, since they're still in training camp, they wanted to have enough room to have multiple fields active at once. So they had to stay outside, which meant it was maybe a little bit slippery, a little bit slick, I don't know. But one of the things that happened was 2 of the Bengals got carted off in air casts and right on the back of golf carts with serious injuries. Running back Chris Evans got hurt initially on a kickoff return practice. I don't know if he got run into by somebody else or tackled or hit, or if he just slipped down on his own. But Chris Evans went down, and then 10 minutes later, backup offensive tackle Deontay Smith also carted off, and everybody said the whole practice stopped. Deontay was on the ground, screaming in pain, obviously in distress. Everybody stopped and watched and, took a knee. And unfortunately, it's looking like both of those players, both Chris Evans and Deontay Smith, are going to be out for the entire season. Both of them torn patellar tendons. It's strange that they would both have the exact same injury within 10 minutes of each other, but they're both going to be out with torn patellar tendons. So running back and offensive tackle, not good news there. We're already pretty thin at running back, and offensive tackle hasn't been looking too great with Amarius Mims out. Trent Brown just came back, but then that same practice, Trent Brown had to leave with tightness in his back. So we already had, if Amarius Mims, you want to say, was the early starter, Trent Brown was supposed to be the veteran starter at right tackle. Then he left practice with a tight back. So then that means all of a sudden Cody Ford is the starter on paper at right tackle. No Mims, no Brown, no Deontay Smith. Behind Cody Ford, it might be Jackson Carman, which is a scary prospect that we're one snap away from Jackson Carman being a starter for the Bengals. Oh my God. After practice, the reporters got to interview different people. Unusually, they got to interview Joe Burrow right after practice. Normally, he does his interviews at the desk with a microphone, but this time it was just kind of a stand-up, impromptu interview. First thing out of Joe Burrow's mouth was how it was a good day for the run game since it was so wet. Apparently, they didn't have a lot of success. Bengals wide receivers were dropping passes. T. Higgins, they called him out as having 4 drops at least in practice, a lot of other drops. It was rainy, it was wet, but Joe Burrow got intercepted 3 different times, they said. Overall, it sounded like the Bears may have gotten a little bit better of the Bengals as a unit, as a team, on the whole. There was obviously some good moments, I think, in their red zone drills. Joe Burrow maybe got a touchdown or two, one to Mike Gesicki, I think they said. But, you're already throwing passes right in front of the end zone. It's not that hard to score a touchdown. On defense, they mentioned how Jermaine Pratt did get an early interception of first round or number 1 overall pick Caleb Williams, the Bears quarterback, in practice. So that was good. But then they also said that the Bears receivers, Keenan Allen beat Cam Taylor-Britt on a fade for a touchdown, and DJ Moore, I think, beat Dax Hill on a slant across the middle for another touchdown. So, it's practice. Who knows? The guys can give up a play here and there, but overall, it didn't sound like the Bengals were dominating the Bears, which would be what you would hope for at least. But Zach Taylor said that it was a good practice since it was in the rain, and y'all remember what it was like against the Browns week 1. It was raining the whole game, which it was not raining the whole game, but he was like, this way we'll know what won't work. It was good to get that out of our system, so now we know what not to do, which is always very convincing. It's very comforting when the coach says, well, that's good because now we know what not to do. Hopefully it doesn't rain. Whatever it does, if the rain is in the forecast, maybe they can cancel the game. I don't know. Apparently they don't like the rain very much. What they do like is money, obviously. And speaking of money, Money Mac, he was the one who signed his contract extension. 3-year contract extension for $16.5 million, $10 million in the first year of the contract, which is apparently, this is a very obscure record to have. Apparently $10 million is the most amount for a kicker getting a 3-year extension in the first year of the contract, whatever that is worth. So, good job for Evan McPherson getting that $10 million coming to his way in the near future. He's got a new baby, he's got a new contract, so hopefully that means that he's going to be very successful in the kicking. Because you don't want your kicker thinking in the back of his mind, well, if I miss this kick, they might not give me a new contract. You want to have total confidence in your kicks, in what you're doing, and that if you miss the kick, it's not going to be the end of the world. Now, obviously, you want to make the kick. You want to make all the kicks. You want to be the best kicker out there and make every kick. But if you're thinking, oh, shit, if I miss this kick, my baby's not going to be able to go to college, whatever. So luckily, Evans got that security. He can make all those kicks. Good for him. We don't know about Ja'Marr Chase. He traveled with the team to Chicago, so at least that's a good sign. It's not like he stayed at home and was totally away from the team. We don't expect him to play at all, but at least he is still with the team and not just holding out completely, making more drama, more of a distraction than it is. People are starting to get nervous, and they're like, oh, well, he wouldn't dare miss a game. It's like, I mean, why not? Like, he could basically sit out until week 10 and then come back and get credit for playing an entire season. And what is he going to forfeit? Like, $500,000? Like I said, he's already made $3.8 million just for being there on day 3. What does he need with another $500,000 if his goal is to make, $35 million a year? Okay, whatever. If sitting out for half of the year lets him stay healthy, protect his body, protect himself, and his money-making potential, I don't blame him at all, especially because today we saw a report, not a finalized deal, but a report that the Cowboys had offered CeeDee Lamb, their wide receiver, $33 million a year. And who knows what the exact guarantees and the length of the contract and what different stipulations the Cowboys are putting on this. This is all what the Cowboys are putting out there to the media. So we don't know for sure, but they said, somewhere in the ballpark of $33 million a year. And of course, Ja'Marr Chase is looking at that thinking, okay, CeeDee Lamb, they're offering him $33 million. Bengals want me to play for $1 million. I don't think so. So I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. Just, hey, I'll just hold out because you guys are going to have to pay me $35 million sooner or later. So Bengals obviously want it to be later. They want to push that as far away into the future as possible. And the other thing we have to consider is Ja'Marr Chase is going to want more than 1 year of guaranteed money. That's the thing that the Bengals are notorious for not doing, is not paying players more than the first year of their contract guaranteed. The only exception recently has been Joe Burrow. They made the exception. He didn't get his contract fully guaranteed, but it's mostly for the first few years it's guaranteed and practically guaranteed all of it. He's going to get all of it as long as he, knock on wood, he's alive at the end of the contract. He should get all the money. With other players, the way the Bengals work it is if they happen to get injured, the Bengals want protection. Whoa, you got injured in year 1. We're not responsible for the rest of that contract. Obviously, the player doesn't want that. The player wants more guaranteed money because they're the one putting their body on the line. If they get injured, they want to make sure that they're still going to be able to have that money coming in. But there's no news on that. I don't expect anything. Like I said, maybe not for a couple of weeks. It's going to probably go right up until game 1, which you don't want because obviously it's best to have Ja'Marr Chase practicing so he can get with the offense, get the timing. I mean, you need a little bit of practice. You can't sit out all of training camp and then just come in and play week 1 in the first game. I don't think anybody's that crazy. Well, we'll have to see what happens. But in this preseason game, I almost forgot one of the most important things. Then Friday, after the Money Mac contract news comes out, I'm already all excited. Then Bengals say, oh, guess what? Week 1, orange uniform. So they come out with a social media video. They got pictures of Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins in the new locker room. They're wearing their new uniform combination, which is orange pants, orange jerseys, black socks. Yes, you heard correctly, orange pants. So that was like the missing uniform combination. They had every other color of, not helmet, but they had every other color of jersey, every other color of sock, but they only had black and white pants. Now they've completed the set. They got orange pants, so they can wear orange on orange. It's going to be an orange alert at the stadium. Obviously, everybody's going to be wearing orange for that game. So that's going to be another cool fan interactivity thing because they have the whiteout. They're going to do the stripe the jungle with orange and black colors in the different sections. And now an entire stadium full of orange. It's going to look amazing. So for week 1, that is going to be an awesome thing. Get everybody pumped up even more than they already would be. Quickly, what are we going to look for in preseason game 2? As I mentioned, Bengals probably aren't going to play most of their starters. I don't expect Joe Burrow or T. Higgins. Most of the offensive starters on offensive line should not be playing at all. Should be mostly 2s and 3s. Same thing for the defense. I don't expect to see the defensive starters out there more than a series, if at all. Hopefully, it's just a bunch of backup players, because the most important thing, as always, is no injuries. That's what I said before last game, and it was looking good. And then Amarius Mims had the strained pec. Not his fault, but there's just, kicked off just a rash of injuries all of a sudden. Brad Robbins is going down in pre-practice warm-ups. So who knows what can happen, but no injuries. We want to see a good performance out of some of the guys we might not expect. One guy I want to see a good performance out of is Charlie Jones. Now, if he's going to be back, we haven't seen much out of Charlie Jones at all, and he is a Chicago area guy. He's going to have a bunch of family there. He's going to want to, show up big for his hometown. So even though it's not a real game, a regular season game, just the fact that Charlie Jones is maybe from the Chicago area, I hope he can show us something, because he didn't get to play at all in the first. Speaking of Illinois and the Chicago area, there's a couple other guys. Rocky Lombardi, the, fourth string quarterback, got moved up because Jake Browning is out. I expect Logan Woodside to start the game, and then Rocky Lombardi should play probably most of the second half. The thing about Rocky Lombardi is he went to Northern Illinois. He was a Husky, so not in Chicago, but at least in the state of Illinois. And then Jung Meta, I forget his first name. It's like Muma or Mema. It looks like, I think it was pronounced Muma, but it's Jung Meta, the linebacker. He is also grew up not too far away from Chicago. So he said he's going to have a bunch of his family in the stands watching him. Hopefully he has another great game. He had 10 tackles in the first game. And if he has another good performance in the second game, that could make a good case for him to make the roster in some capacity, because he was undrafted. And then he said, people were asking him in the locker room, like, dude, you didn't get drafted? But, it's not about how you get there. All that matters is what you do now that you're in the building. And he's making a name for himself. Hopefully it's another situation, like I said, like Clay Johnston, where if he just keeps playing so good as a linebacker, making tackles everywhere, don't give the Bengals any choice but to keep you around. On the offensive side, I want to see just some kind of offense. Even if Joe Burrow and the starters don't play, I just want to see them move the ball and get a little bit more of a running game. Now, Zach Moss, their starter on paper, he didn't play at all in game 1. And I'm not sure if he's going to play at all in game 2, really. He was ill. He was sick last week. I don't think he had an injury, but I don't know if there's really any reason. He knows how to play in the NFL. He's been in the league for a few years. I don't think he really needs to get out there and get tackled, possibly put him at risk for injury. Since they just had Chris Evans, one of their other running backs, go out for the rest of the year, you want to be careful with who you're putting out there on the field. So it's probably going to be a lot of the younger running backs, which may mean they don't get too much, but hopefully they surprise me. Hopefully those young running backs bust out and have some long runs and get something going on the ground for the Bengals, which we haven't seen too much of. But we'll have to see. And for the Bears said they were going to play their starters. So that will be interesting if they do play the starters, because Caleb Williams, he made a couple good plays in the limited sample size that we saw him in game 1. He had some good arm strength, reading the field, showed off some good mobility and athleticism to get out of the pocket and make something happen. So that was interesting, just because he at least showed, okay, yeah, this guy can play in the NFL. He's got NFL level talent, which is what you really want to see in these preseason games. It's just, how do these guys look out there? Even if it doesn't matter, it's just an exhibition, but just do they pass the eyeball test, so to speak? Because I can tell you, Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, who was playing for the Carolina Panthers, and I know the Panthers were absolutely terrible, but even still, I did not see Bryce Young really show any qualities that would make you think, oh yeah, that guy, number 1 overall pick in the NFL. Didn't see it. I did see it from Caleb Williams, so we're going to have to watch and see. Even though he's on the other team, I want to see, how does this guy look? And for the rest of the Bears, I don't anticipate them playing their starters too much, but hopefully it's a good game at least. The last game was pretty interesting. It was a close game. I just want to see a fun, competitive game. But after the game, We'll come back, wrap up all the news, all the interesting things, good, bad, interesting, annoying, etc. Until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.